Hello, I'm speaking with three people. We are four of us, and it's Deborah from United States, from California. It's Dr. Catherine Horton from Switzerland, and Ole Dammegård from Spain. And could you just say hello, each one of you, and say something about yourself? First, Deborah, maybe.
Yes. Hello, everyone. This is Deborah Taveras with StompTheCrime.net and PrimaryWater.org. And I'm joining arms across the oceans here with my friends from Spain and from Switzerland and from the Czech Republic. And I am very honored to be talking with the three of you because we are all in horrendous trouble. And we face unthinkable actions that have all been written down that we can read and understand and see what is happening. And in the roundtable today, I have some various topics I want to discuss, and just a sentence. I want to talk about the accounting system, the one world accounting system that has been for many years launched in every government agency throughout the entire United States and globally. It's like a one world order, one world accounting, one world religion, etc. And I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about the intentions of 5G and many other things as well. So I'm just preempting what my conversation is going to be, but not limited to that. Thank you, the three of you. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Oh, I also want to talk about targeted individuals because I am receiving many, many emails through my website from people that are tortured, voice to skull, gang stalked, and literally unable to function. And they're needing the comfort of knowing that they're not alone. And I think this is the hope of our broadcast today, is for people that hear this to know they're not alone, that we're uniting as we are right now because we're not alone either. And that this is our freedom right now. What you're hearing right now is what we call freedom, freedom to discuss what our realities are. So again, I thank you.
Catherine?
Yes, so I can jump right in because I, in fact, am one of those targeted individuals. So I would very much like to chime in with what Deborah said. I have been investigating my own situation and that of targeted individuals for over 2 years now, intensively, and for many, many years beforehand without even knowing that targeted individuals exist. And I offer regular consulting to victims, and I've gathered a very good overview what's happening around the world. And I'm also preparing court cases that are to launch in early 2019. But I completely echo what Deborah says, that these targeted individuals who are actually victims of a global Holocaust and a global genocide, they need support more than ever because the assaults have exploded in the last 6 months. So just over the last 3 days of Christmas, the brutality of attacks on me were absolutely extraordinary. I have been crippled. I have head chips and probably also brain chips. They have been heated. I have spent most of the 3 days of Christmas in absolute agony, mostly in bed. And I can now, today, I've got difficulties walking and coordinating myself. So this is the type of torture that we are talking about. And yes, it ties in with the 5G as well. So for me, it's very, very present what we're talking about today. And as far as freedoms go and rights go, I still have some freedom of speech, ironically, but I have lost the freedom to be safe in my own home. My home and every home I flee to is being gunned with satellite-based directed energy weapons. I have lost the ownership and sovereignty over my body because I'm being tortured and raped with non-consensual implants. And basically, yes, I am fighting for my life along with thousands of other people. So for me, this broadcast is a lifeline. So thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you.
Well, my name is Ole Dammegård, and I've been spending the last 35 odd years trying to expose top political assassinations and so-called false flag operations, which equals state-sponsored terrorism, all in the same agenda as what we're going to talk about tonight. I've been aware of the agenda that we now experience for the last 20 odd years with the mass invasion, mass immigration, with these different types of attacks from everywhere. This has been out in the open since the early 90s, as far as I know. And but now it's come to a climax, and I feel this is a fantastic time in one way. It's an awful time and a fantastic time, because it's almost like the dark and the light are fighting each other, and it's like a drag race where the two forces are struggling. And when you look at the darkness, just gets worse and worse and worse, but at the same time we have this awakening going on as well. So there's incredible, amazing things going on, as well as the dark things just getting worse and worse and worse. So for me, it's very important to keep the balance in the middle of it all. I've been in doomsday situations since I don't know how many years, and it comes and goes in waves where it just feels like, oh my God, we're going under, everything is falling apart, this is the end of times. But we're still here, we're still dancing, we're still standing in balance. And the difference is now that in 30 years ago, I felt totally alone. Now we're like millions and millions and millions and millions. And when you start tracking down who's behind these horrific events, it comes down to a very, very small little group that are the ones pulling the strings, even though many people are involved in these operations. But these are mostly normal people that are just doing what they think is their job or the correct thing to do, because everything has been totally compartmentalized, so they're not aware of the what they're actually doing, totally destroying the world for themselves as well, their children, future generations, you name it, because these attacks is coming just from everywhere. And I think it's quite interesting with you describing your symptoms and stuff, because I have had weird symptoms for quite a while. I'm limping around, I can't sleep, I'm walking, and I don't know, am I making it up? Am I sort of like, but what the hell is going on? So I've been to the doctor recently here. I made all different types of tests just to see, tell me what's wrong, and then I can do something about it, because now I just feel my system is overloaded somehow. There's this pressure from the inside that I haven't experienced before. So it's like, I don't know, either I'm sick or I'm totally healthy and these things are coming from the outside. Either way, it's very important for us to focus on and find out what is the actual problem, because if we don't see the problem, we cannot come up with a solution. And if we cannot identify why and how these things are done, once again, we cannot find a solution. So I'm very happy to be here with you, and also with such brave individuals that are willing to stand up for these things. So, well, there you go. I'm very happy, like I said, to be here tonight with you.
Thank you. I would like to speak about freedom of speech, because we are losing it. It's, for example, for me, my English YouTube channel got strike because of your lecture. They remove it, your
Sorry
lecture,
about that.
and they have no right to Google YouTube for that. And then lately we did an interview, and right after that they have I've got strike on the Swedish YouTube channel. I have 3 little YouTube channels in English, Swedish, and Czech. So it was like revenge, because the lecture was there almost 1 year now. And directly after we have talked with Kerry Cassidy, Catherine, and so directly after that I've got strike on the Swedish also. So I would like to talk also, what do you think about to start a court? The name I I suggest is the International People's Court of True Justice, and that people don't need to be lawyers. Actually, it's much better that people are not lawyers, because the education is obviously not totally wrong, but the people know nothing about New World Order, mostly about satanic ritual sacrificing. They don't know about terrorism of NATO. They don't know that NATO is involved in satanic are involved in satanic rituals. What are they? How can they judge properly? I mean, you have judges on the highest level in United States. How do you call them? The supreme judges. And what have they done against 9/11, this false flag? What have they done against it? Or the prosecutors, attorney general, what have they done? It's better that we say, for example, any citizen, you are obliged to know this and this and that when you are 18 years old, and you don't go and study law if you don't know how 9/11 happened. So we have close to lawlessness. It's like law of this New World Order jungle we have now. So what I would like to ask you, what do you think about to start an international court? It would be much online and much quick, like if you take George Soros, if we would have somebody like prosecutor who reads what he has done, and then many judges, people like judges, who could agree on that this man has done so much against humanity that he shouldn't be allowed to have any property at all.
Well, yeah, I'm hearing you, Alexandra. This is Deborah from the United States. We are the enemy, and the courts are criminal processing units set up by those in control, the overlords. And attorneys carry bar cards, a British accreditation regency. They work to support the laws for those in control. And so I look at an international court of information rather than necessarily and outlining what individuals are doing. Absolutely. I see that as important knowledge for everyone that is starting to become aware of this reality that has been fabricated around us while we are being assassinated, murdered, tortured, and poisoned from every unimaginable delivery system. And so, so I just wanted to throw that in. I didn't mean to interrupt your trend of thought, but I'm just mainly interested myself in continuing to get the information out and having people increase their level of knowledge, because I think the more people that listen to broadcasts like this that start to look at the documents that we talk about and start to realize their reality, will have more brains on the table to figure out what we can and cannot ultimately do. I think right now, at least, I look at my job as continuing to dig through documents and get them out so that people can read them for themselves and increase what they understand is occurring all around them. So that's what I wanted to throw in. And when you're ready to wrap it up, Alexandra, I have a really important symptoms list that I wanted to discuss with Olay that has symptoms on it, so that people can download that, because everyone has symptoms now from the increased frequencies throughout the entire world. And we need to know what those symptoms are, download that list. because we're treating things individually and medicating things individually through an illegitimate pharmaceutical corporation system that is also set up as a part of the genocide program. So I will let you continue, Alexandra.
Thank you. And what do you think, Catherine and then Ole, about this idea with court?
So I have got, so in principle, I completely agree with this. I think it's even the way forward because, for example, it has already been established that the Anglo-Saxon judiciary has refused to deal with cases of the genocide of indigenous children in Canada and the United States brought about by the Vatican crime cartel, right? So they had to have their own hearings, their own tribunals of natural justice just to hear the evidence. Now, this was done by, I think his surname is Annette. So I think he was formerly a pastor, and he set up these courts for natural justice to hear the evidence. And under the common law, it is perfectly acceptable to have these common law courts and try people in the common law courts and procure warrants for arrest. And they had warrants for arrest for several high-profile people. Now, the problem is that these common law courts still do not have an enforcement arm because the police simply refuses the law. So what happened is that even though a warrant was issued, and it's actually a warrant for citizens' arrest, so once a warrant under common law court has been issued, it is perfectly acceptable for sovereign citizens to conduct the arrest of a person. But nevertheless, I think several citizen arrests have been tried, but they still haven't been successful in the classical sense. So my current strategy is entirely motivated by the sheer urgency of survival. So I think at this moment, we should pursue both. I think we need to work with the traditional courts that we have, and that's because I stood pro se before 3 judges, and 2 of them were perfectly fine and were perfectly willing to support me. The third throughout the case under circumstances that I personally consider to be fraudulent and corrupt. But that aside, 2 judges were entirely willing to operate the courts as they should operate. Now, my current strategy is the following. I am working on getting all the victim cases lined up so that the evidence and the affidavits are in place and the timeline of the offenses and so on. I'm also working on getting experts, for example, experts on false flags or experts on any aspects of this government criminality to write affidavits so that we have the expert testimonies also lined up and testifying about the and then what I'm teaching people is how to combine the two and make their own court bundles and start filing them in the standard courts. Now, what I would like to do is I am approaching the courts first with emergency injunctions. Now, emergency injunctions are a means that come from the common law courts, and they are a method to stop the other party, an identified other party, from doing something that is harmful to you. So you can file an injunction and procure an injunction even when it hasn't been established that what this person is doing is necessarily detrimental to you. But if there's a reasonable cause to come to that conclusion, you can file for an injunction and obtain one. So at this moment in time, that is the last remaining option we have as targeted individuals, I think. And victims can, for example, file for an immediate stop of the gunning, which can be measured and can be made audible and visible. They can also file for an immediate stop of the chip torture, and that too can be measured and so on. So there's a way to check if the other party stuck to it or not. So this is what I'm working on now. But nevertheless, I am fully aware that the courts, at least to 1/3, are completely captured by this organized crime syndicate. So that I know from my personal case. I also spoke to the journalist Janet Fallon, who analyzed the US courts, and she dug out the mechanism by which the US judiciary was being corrupted. If I remember correctly, she looked at mortgages that judges held, and she discovered that the judge would, get a mortgage for multi-million dollar mansion and pay off several millions of dollars in 2 or 3 years. but their income would be something like $350,000. So it is impossible to generate the income within 2 years that's required to pay off the mortgage that they had. So clearly there must have been illicit funds coming from somewhere. But she established that roughly a third of the judiciary seems to be corrupted, with evidence of that corruption. So my current status is that I am hitting the normal courts with these cases as quickly as possible in early 2019. But should the cases fail, I'll take that as an argument to retry these cases in these types of common law courts, and then procure, a judgment from those, and then file the next set together with the already procured judgments in previous cases from the common law courts, and increasingly show the current judiciary that they are signing up for genocide. So this is my strategy, and I just chose it not because I believe in the 100% honesty of the courts. I just, as a systems analyst, it appears to me that recapturing the systems that we have already is quicker than building up something from scratch. But I think we might also have to build up something from scratch anyway to put pressure on the original courts. So I am fully behind this idea.
I believe
Ole?
to start something from scratch, and I just want to say that Kevin Annett unfortunately is a fraud. The ITCCS, they have. I have wasted a lot of time with them. It has cost me a lot of money. They have practically stolen money from me, and I believe the witnesses are real, but they just let them talk, but nothing happened then. I have discussed this with David Icke also, and he said that his impression is also that when he asked for help with some child or so, Kevin Annett never could help or anything. So
it's because he can't help, because it's a world. We're Earth Inc. We're not only USA Inc. We're Earth Inc. And the legal systems have been altered, and the corporate structure is a commercial under commercial admiralty law as we understand it here in the United States. That's statutory law throughout all of the states and counties and municipalities here in the United States. And statutes are it's their corporations and for their agencies, and we are all the enemy. And I think that's obvious. So I'm looking at the amount of time that it took this incremental death entanglement of systems to wrap around us, and to recognize finally that we were in a system of death, and looking at trying to go into their corrupt buildings. I mean, even crossing over into their thresholds, you're entering into their criminal domain. And I've just seen far too many attempts on sovereign bases here in the United States, people that take the sovereign approach. And they're considered through the brainwashing here to be terrorists. And it is for me a reality that I've come to understand, and I liken it to what I say and include in what I call truth trauma. And lawmakers are reelected despite facing corruption and criminal charges. So that's on every level. And we may have someone that seems to appease us, but that's only because appeasement is part of the strategy to allow us to believe that there still is some measure of justice in a court structure that calls itself justice, when it really means just, J-U-S-T, us, U.S. It's not justice for us, it's just us now. And I think that's what all of the documents and the years of literally being under the gun to try to look at what on earth has happened and how did this happen has brought many of us here in the United States to realize we don't have a court system at all. It's just a court of corruption. We don't, as you were saying, Catherine, and also Alexandra, we don't have a system that can arrest. There's nowhere to put anyone that we would arrest. The entire system is already set up, and we don't have prisons to put people in that we might attempt for a citizen's arrest. There isn't the structure for us. And again, we're the enemy. We're the ones that are being imprisoned. We're being put behind electrified frequency bars of imprisonment. We're being tortured and brutalized, being fed poisonous foods, flown over by chemtrails, fires and earthquakes, and enormous assaults with weather weapons on our coastlines and flooding. And we're the enemy. We're under mass attack with a massive weapons system. And as you were saying, Alexandra, we're losing our freedom of speech, absolutely. And I look at what we're doing right now as being really the opportunity for others to hear our discoveries after many years of understanding what the documents say. And it is a deep dive. And when you take that deep dive and you understand the depth of corruption, and we've seen it here time and time again, we've had targeted individuals present court evidence and go before our representatives in what they believe to be a country of laws and justice, a land of the free and the home of the brave. But I will tell you, they're only dismissed and turned away, and they're still targeted, and they're still murdered. And the crime syndicate is still functioning. In fact, as one of you mentioned, it has amplified over the last 6 or so months. It has gotten on steroids, and I see it here with the massive fires, the intentional burning of cities, and the increased chemtrailing. The chemtrailing or geoengineering or aerosol spraying, however you would like to call it, has intensified here immeasurably. And so I'm looking at a system now that has also woven in to all of the accounting in all of our cities here in the United States, and likely where you are as well. I was unaware of the depth of accounting practices that have already occurred. And I don't know if you want me to get into this right now. Let me know if you want me to start in on this right now, because I don't want to take away from important things that all of you want to discuss.
Shall we do so that Ole can say what he thinks about to start a new?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then directly after that you could.
Yes.
Okay.
I can just say that I used to believe in law and justice and courts and police, but that was like late 80s when I lost my virginity when it came to that thing. Because what I found over and over and over again was the same thing, that the courts are not for us. They're only there to cover it up and stop real investigations. Nobody ever gets sentenced, and if they get sentenced, they will throw us someone, one of their own, but on a low level, that will just have to take the fall for them. And the real bad boys never get caught. They're never tried. They're never called to court or anything. So I totally lost all kind of faith in the justice system in Sweden, other countries. I see the exact same thing being played out in the States as other countries as well. So what to do? That's the question. It's the same with all of these official investigations of top political assassinations or terror attacks. It's the same crap. There's absolutely nothing going on. The only thing they're there is to put up a nice front that will deal with the media, and then point in all the different directions. It was the patsy, it was the patsy, it was the patsy, it was ISIS, 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 and that's it. Instead of looking at the real evidence. Nobody never ever looks at the real evidence except normal people like myself. And then I believe that these investigations are then used to target individuals like myself who are trying to find out what the hell is going on. We are the ones that they point out for hit teams or people to freak out, beat us up or freak us out or whatever, intimidate us, threaten our kids or whatever. So I don't know what to say, but I've found so many times in the court cases, I find the judge is a Freemason and the DA is a Freemason and the lawyer is a Freemason and the accused is a Freemason, and then he walks free. How surprising is that? But if anyone just parks his car in the wrong spot, who's not part of this secret gang, they will beat you to death, and put you away forever and ever if you steal a loaf of bread. So just like Deborah says, the whole thing is set up, but not for us. It's against us. So I don't want to be sort of like negative in any way or form to the attempts of going the legal way. I just don't know. But we're at a point where we're trying new territory here because nobody has ever succeeded. That doesn't mean that now is not the time when the situation is ripe to actually make a move forward. And if it is possible to use the system that is already there, if they suddenly becomes what they're supposed to be, then hallelujah. But until then, I just feel that we have to take the power back, but in a non-violent way, not mass murder, not lynching times. That is not the solution, but somehow transcend this in a powerful, non-violent and absolute fearless way by exposing the truth, standing up for the truth and not bending over, but just keep going one step at a time and not let us freak out, just like you wonderful people that are still there, not getting into hatred, not getting into revenge, but just, I am not moving. I'm standing here in balance, in peace and compassion, but I am not tolerating what is going on, and it has to stop now. How to accomplish that? I take one step at a time. I don't have any ready solutions, so I'm very much willing to learn here tonight, whatever I can to get empowered to move forward.
I just would like to slip in one thing, because before we move to Deborah, because I do want to hear about her accounting insights, because I think they're very relevant. I just would like to slip in one thing. I spent a very long time after my court case was thrown out and declared frivolous and vexatious. This was before I found out that I'm part of a global genocide, so I think mine is the last case that's frivolous and vexatious. But after that shock of corruption, I spent a very long time thinking about this as a kind of as a systems analyst, just to detach myself from the situation and overcome the emotional overwhelmedness that followed my court case. I came up with the following answer. So there are court cases which are indeed successful. The recent Monsanto case is one glimmer of hope. And there's also pedophile arrests in the United States. One of the things that we are not aware of, precisely because the media is owned by the cartel, is that actually for the first time in history, we do have mass arrests of pedophiles. Okay, so this was just the arrest phase. And I think when the courts and when the prisons are run by Freemasons, we have to be extra careful that the people arrested actually stay in prison when nobody's looking. That's another question. But anyway, we do have convictions of pedophiles in a much higher number than ever before in the history. So this is something that hasn't been reported. And I think this goes back to those, up to 2/3 of honest judges who, at least at the high court level, are still doing their best. So it is possible. And I think one of the reasons why we feel so helpless is because the success stories are kept from us. Now, cases are very successful when there's an overbearing pressure on the judge. And in actual fact, you have to think about it like this. When you're a judge and you have to decide a case, the intelligence agencies are going to put pressure on you. They're also going to apply neurotechnology to you and have all these sort of effects on you. And then there's a counterbalance from the general public, from the viewing public, from the tweeting public. And then the judge has a decision. Is he going to go with the short-term pressure from the mafia, or is he going to go from the, with the long-term pressure from the general public, who has the power to destroy his career or her career? And I think the court cases are successful when the pressure from the public is much larger, the psychological pressure on the judge, than what intel can actually put on the judge. And only then are they successful. But what this means is that we do have to apply the same kind of, peaceful, nevertheless psychological mobbing tactics to bring it home to a judge that if he doesn't find in the favor of the victim, if he actually finds in favor of a genocide, his career will be over, and actually he will also, under martial law, be in line for a death penalty for high treason. So, that's a line that we can run, but what this requires is that every court case that goes into court has the full attention of all the whistleblowers, and we literally focus all of our powers onto these focal points, and we take it case by case by case, and then put together all the elements that we need to shut the system down. Because the cartel was working exactly the same way. They put certain laws into place, they had certain legal judgments, which they paid for, and so on, until this entire system was, strung up. And then that's when they made their pincer movement on us. And we can do the same thing, and we can even do it quicker, because we are, at the end of the day, more people, and we also have this, the fact on our side that we are not trying to run genocide, and that is literally the only hope I can see. But it requires that we all pay attention, we all put our expertise into every court case we find valuable, and we make absolutely sure that the points we argue in court are such that once they're decided in our favor, help other court cases. So we keep pushing back the boundaries. So it's a multiple court case strategy, basically. That's the one I see.
Well, I at this point, because there is so little that I see that we can do, honestly, I'm not going to attempt to impede anybody's effort for whatever they choose to decide to do and how they decide to spend their time. But right now, this is Deborah from Stomp the Crime. I look at the urgency of us being able to survive the intentional torturing with the increased frequencies and the immediate and fast rollout of 5G. We don't survive to go to court when these increased frequencies again continue to take our minds. And that is the goal. The goal is for total global mind control. And the few morsels of success that we see in courts, and I can say this for the smart meter deployment here in California, when we were vehemently opposed to the smart meters here back in 2009, etc., when we had found out we were already 75% deployed upon by Pacific Gas and Electric, which again is Rothschild. We really fought against that. There were large groups of people here in Northern California, and I was appalled that our utility company that I thought worked for us and we paid them would deploy, in their words, a piece of equipment that would sabotage our homes, was intel collection, and at the same time would increase frequencies and cause us various illnesses. And as I recognized, and many of us recognized, the enormity of what we faced, we did get some concession. And here's what was offered. It was psychologically determined in some major institutions how industry would plot to manipulate the public into the acceptance of the smart meters. So they gave us the opt-out, which allowed people to believe that it probably wasn't a bad deployment of frequencies. It maybe wasn't as bad as what we were saying, because after all, we were all given a choice, and that was psychologically engineered. So yes, many people felt that they were getting justice, but it was an engineered plot of justice. And when a court case is won, it is, again, just the illusion to keep people in the box that there is a justice system. There is not. And so those few cases that might get recognition in some level of minor victory, again, it is set up to keep most people in the fake reality that we are all in on every single level. So as I said, I'm not opposed to anyone's efforts. Anyone obviously at this point can do what they want, except that I feel right now efforts need to be put forth on how to protect ourselves from these daily assaults and attacks with frequencies. Because for those that are being, and there's different programs that people are put in, and certainly many are put in to where the directed energy weapons are disabling them and they're chipped. And we have to figure out how to survive that, or there's nothing else. We don't go beyond that. And as we look at the 5G rollout, as I read it in these documents, it's going to literally control all data, control the internet, and make trillions and trillions of dollars for those that are doing all of this to us. So that's my my take on that. And Ole, I think I absolutely have found myself in your camp with understanding over the years of documents and over the years, many, many years of going to local meetings, council meetings, county meetings, going to San Francisco to the California Public Utility Commission meetings, thinking that surely they would reduce the deployment of the smart meters. And what did we see? When we got an opt-out, what we thought was a victory, those people then dropped out of the fight because they had gotten an opt-out, were not required to have a smart meter installed. But what did we see in the dead of winter here in the United States, in the central portion of the United States, with weather temperatures in the low teens, where utility companies were cutting off the power on telephone poles or on the distribution pole into individual homes of people that were saying they were already suffering from electromagnetic sensitivities, and they were put in the dark and in the cold. So while we were getting the opt-out and bathing with the idea of a victory, they were killing people by turning off their power. And we've been told here now that when we have a red flag warning here of fire in California, where we have low humidity and winds and heat, that we're going to have fires. Now, all this is, of course, constructed by weather weapons. So we waltz into court and say, stop this, when there's no admission to the enormity of the crimes being perpetrated. It's ignored. After all, chemtrail and weather weapons doesn't exist in the minds of those in those levels. All the assaults does not exist. Yeah, a few people may listen, but I'm concerned and more interested in focusing on how we survive. What have any of you learned that allows you to function when you're being directly targeted and hit with frequencies? And how can you survive one day at a time to continue the information war that we're in, to get the reality out? Because we are really the scribes for the future. By discussing what we're all seeing, what all the documents tell us, and bringing more people on board to understanding what the assaults are, because we're being taken down and literally put into a psychotronic fence where travel is being limited, as you were saying, Alexandra, and every one of us knows that our ability to communicate is going to be short-lived. That's all being greatly impacted. So I'm most interested in talking about how we survive under these weapon systems on a daily basis so we can continue to be functional and be on calls like this.
I have got a very quick statement to make about that. So I have tried shielding. I lived, I think, a year in a metal shed where I worked and slept in a metal shed, which had extra layers of shielding. I think I had on every side something like six to 7 layers of sheet metal. And what I found is that the pulse, the waveforms, which I still don't understand how it works, so it's some type of waveform that is not the type of physics I know, these pulsed energy projectiles shoot straight through. So unless you have a bunker of about 12-inch steel, I don't think there's a way to shield yourself from the satellite space gunning. This is what I discovered. So right now I am being gunned. I am being followed. I moved in Switzerland to a 0 background radiation environment where my EMF meters cannot measure the background. It's that low. But I'm being gunned in the head non-stop, 24/7, day and night. And the weapons follow me around inside buildings. So at that point, it is physically impossible to prevent, being shot in the head and killed instantly. And I think this is the system that they wanted to build up. So this is something I measured myself and testified to myself. So what I'm planning to do now is I want to go to a court and actually file an injunction and lay out the precise method of my murder, which one of them they have to pick. So, and I can just point to the cases where MI5 and German Intel has publicly executed people already. And I'm just going to put it to a court, and I want a judge's statement about what the population is expected to do, because we are now in the, it's the suicide question, basically. So when I go into court, my question is, would the High Court like that I kill myself, which is the only way out for me out of the torture, or shall I wait for MI5 or MI6 to kill me, which they have tried 6 times already with assassination attempts on the road? What is the plan? Shall I stay alive to be rapeable and mutilatable for the training of agents who are anything between 8 years old to 16, 18? Shall I keep myself alive for the mutilation training of children? Is that the plan? And I want the judge to come to a judgment, and this is what he has to do. Now,
Catherine, I want to jump in really quick because I think I've really interviewed many heavily targeted individuals over the years, and one of the threads for protection is prayer and understanding this is a spiritual warfare with between a battle of good and evil. And I have known many targeted individuals that through prayer are able to survive their assaults. And we have to talk about that to a degree because that is what is helping a lot of people. And this is Luciferian that is occurring, evil in its most deepest, darkest form. And prayer has alleviated the assaults of many people that I know that have utilized the power of prayer. But that having been said, the intention, of course, is the destruction of life and property and all natural resources. And we see that happening. And and all of you are in an area like I am. As I was saying before we went live in this discussion, I've looked up the Climate Action Plan in Spain, the Climate Action Plan in Switzerland, and the Climate Action Plan in the Czech Republic, and the Climate Action Plan everywhere else throughout the entire world, even in Cuba, where people would last think that there would have been some bending of that, but that's not the case. And what the Climate Action Plan is, they are plans of genocide. They're plans of resource elimination. So not only are we being targeted with directed energy weapons and gang stalked and psyops from satellites and the deep, deep, dark state of reality of policing here everywhere, we're also having our oxygen depleted, not only in the atmosphere but in the water. And we're having our coastlines eroded by weather systems, by blast wave accelerators, things they invented in World War II. I have a YouTube up. Coastlines under attack. Everything is under attack. 70% of the global population lives on the coastlines. And why? Because we feel better. So I guess some of the alternatives for our survival is to stay in the areas where there is negative ions, so we're not so easily mind controlled. I don't know how many of you saw my interview with Barry Trower, and it's up on YouTube. It's called The Cooking of Humanity. And you will see that I am sitting there holding a document that we downloaded from the whitehouse.gov website. And it shows radar around the coastal areas of the United States. Essentially, that was all mind control, all set up for mass mind control. And what has been recognized is people that live along the coastlines that have the negative ions, the benefit from the coast, they're less able to be mind controlled. So I guess we need to talk about some solutions, because they're attempting to move us into areas further inland for easy and more accessible access for total mind control. I guess we have to talk about some things that work. Like I have seen people that have put screens over their windows, the outside of their home, when they're near a cell tower, and that does help to reduce the extremely low frequencies. And of course, as things are amped up, I can see where that's going to be no longer efficient. But I can tell you there are things that people have done, and dependent on what program they are in and what assault program they are in, there are ways that they can reduce and minimize some of these assaults. Not only the directed energy weapons and the gunning, which is exactly how to describe it, Catherine. I love the way you describe that. That's exactly what it is. But there are many programs. There's the psychotronics. Look at what they did in the Rwanda genocide in the mid-90s with the use of microwaves in those Hercules C-130 planes that flew over the tribes that were in dispute, that they had secret cells on the ground, CIA cells, boots on the ground, just like they have here in the fires. We've recently discovered a new book that just came out resulting of a personal encounter with the fires here in Sonoma County. And you all discussed this in the last interview that the three of you did, that I posted on stopthecrime.net, and I want to bring everyone's attention to it. It was a very important interview, and it's called War on All: Ghost Armies, Global Attack Centers, Small Cell Warriors, and Murders. And I can tell you, we have sleeper cells. And what was discovered and brought out in this latest book on chronicling what happened here during the Sonoma County fire back in October of 2017, what they tell us is, as if the fires weren't enough, they found themselves in the midst of anarchy with looters running unchecked through the streets. They chased them out of houses with shovels and confronted them when they showed up in disguise. This is the type of insurgency and forms of government that are happening, and they're located throughout the entire world to jump in and amplify all disasters. And the level of hitting us and targeting us, we haven't discovered the bottom of it yet. So I'm really happy about talking with all of you, because we need to. And I think that's where people will discover more more balance, as you were saying, Ole, because I think in the midst of this, we have to find balance. We have to find love. We have to enjoy our families, which seems out of sync to understanding what our reality is. But it's the one thing that I have found one day at a time that allows me to assimilate the horror that I find that we're all in. Otherwise, thinking about not being here is not an option. Suicide is not an option. It goes against God's law. And I have had a number of targets send these things, and I would love to talk about this. I've had a number of targets saying that they now have various cancers as a result of their targeting, and that they're not interested in any of the conventional or non-conventional treatment for their cancer, because they're looking at why would they want to continue to live with the treatment to continue to be tortured, but they won't kill themselves. And one of the Catherine, you were talking about genocide programs. One of the genocide programs talks about suicides as being a mechanism for genocide. And it's just not an option, because when you look at, we have on stopthecrime.net an interview, and it's called 5G, the culling, C-U-L-L-I-N-G, of humanity. And it's an interview that we were doing with Dr. Bill Deagle, and not the same Deagle, not the E and the L are different, about the Intel site, deagle.com. And there's interactive maps and plans of the intention to reduce the global population. Now, again, these are all plans, and not all their plans work out in the time frame that they would like to have them. But when you look at the fact that those plans divulge that the rate of suicide will be increased because of these plans. Of course, we have V2K, Voice to Skull, which urges people to kill themselves. And it's just part of this intelligence attack on our minds. And then they talk about the other consequence of demise is the forced relocation of people and the inability to psychologically adjust to losing it all and being forced off your land. Now we're seeing massive evacuations out of Central America and South America with migrants. And one of the things that's not being discussed is the fact, not only, of course, is there madness in the streets and chaos, and of course, lots of lots of money being spent to literally create weapons within those groups with people that are totally mind controlled and work with gangs. But people have been forced to relocate because of the change of climate. And many of these people are running from the results of climate control. They're not able to grow food, support their family. And you read that time after time, that they're just not able to survive. The same thing has been happening in India. So as we look at the various levels of assault, we have to really look at the big ones, and that's this psychotronic weapons assaults, of course, and the climate control, which is encompassing of many goals. And all of our cities, all of our countries, and all of yours as well, have adopted these plans. And what we have seen is these plans must be adopted in all the countries. And so then we see the financing that is coming up from all of these plans, which will force all of us, every one of us, to retrofit our homes. This is all part of an asset stripping program, and further frequencies with appliances, even kitchen faucets and shower heads, are going to connect wirelessly now to all of the wireless smart grid, water meter smart grid, just like the electric smart grid, so that water can be turned off and denied because it's being privatized. And now they're spending billions on wastewater treatment plants so that they can use our urine and fecal material along with pharmaceuticals as a form of water delivery now into municipal water supplies. And I found an article on the World Bank talking about blending this toxic fecal and pharmaceutical and urine water into our reservoirs by injecting it into upriver streams and rivers that will flow into our reservoirs, and it will blend in with the already toxic water that's in the reservoirs. And the intensity and assaults, I just haven't found a bottom to it yet. And then I was telling you about learning about the control of the accounting in all of our cities. I'd like to explain that a little bit when all of you have talked. So just invite me back into that topic when you all would like to, because I really would like to discuss that.
Can I make two very short points, and then I pass the microphone, just very, very brief. Number one, I mean, what I said about suicide, by the way, I would like to make it clear that I never thought about suicide, but people are trying to kill me. So if I'm dead, it most certainly wasn't suicide. I'm not saying, you know, this was basically a legal point, because I absolutely do not advocate suicide to anybody at all, but people do take it up as an option. For example, in the US, the veterans are killing themselves, I think 60 per day or something like that, or 28 people per day. It is ludicrous, and it's completely understandable because the torture is just so ferocious. Now, I am fighting night and day so people don't have to kill themselves. But what I'm trying to say is that when we bring it into a court, and the court is actually faced, these are the facts, this is what's happening, these are all the expert testimonies, these are all the victim testimonies, and the court would have to put it in writing that yes, they are making the decision that, for example, people should kill themselves. They will not be able to do that, because as soon as they bring a judgment like that, it will be an unconscionable judgment, and we can take it from there. So one of the things I'm seeing, and this leads me to my second point, is talking to people, I realized that we have become detached from knowing how our systems are even intended to work. So most people don't know how a computer works, and that's fine because it's so complex. But most of us should know how the legal system works. And most of us should know what remedies are open to us. It is on purpose that we're not taught these things, but it is not that hard. And one of the things I really encourage people to do is, instead of falling into learned helplessness and thinking, oh my goodness, the systems are not working for us, they're working against us, I want us all to force the systems to work for us. But for that, we need to start off with knowing how they're even expected to work. So one of the things that I think we should do is keep hammering our systems, and as soon as they do not work the way they should, file criminal complaints and keep filing. And when the police doesn't work the way, then keep filing, keep filing, keep filing, and iterate until we really bring them to their knees. With a paper war, with an administrative terrorist paper war against them, you know. And it is not true that we can't get anywhere. We just have to keep ratcheting, and we have to keep increasing the pressure on them with every time. For example, in the case of California, I'm still lacking an actual, you know, the communities have to do it. They have to make a death toll. They have to put together the evidence that it was laser-based weapons, which is all around them, but they have to do it. And then they have to file a commercial lien on the estate of the Rothschilds. If it's the Rothschilds who own this, they have to file commercial liens on their estate, and they have to start filing punitive damages and you know, all the other criminal. But I don't think anybody has ever filed against the Rothschilds yet. Why not? You know, if you're all being killed, we might as well, you know. What's the worst that can happen? That we're going to get killed?
Well, I think it takes many more conversations like we're having right now to have people understand who our enemy is. It's beyond the Rothschilds. And to understand that we're being perpetrated by multi-facets of warfare, and that we are designated as the enemy. I've said before, and I think of it like this: we're in a deadly computer game gone live. And I'm looking at some documents, and when I get the link for this conference, I will post it under that, Alexandra, so people can take a look at this document. It's called the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force 2018 report, Electromagnetic Defense Task Force 2018 report. And what we're facing is many assaults. And in this report, it breaks the assaults into several domains. First of all, it's discussing an electromagnetic pulse. Well, with Rothschild in control with the utility grid, they can pulse the utility grid and take our system down. And they talk about a black start. A black start is when we have no power at all. And I think an excellent book to read to understand what that would look like, again, this is written as a novel, but it's called 1 Second After. So for those that would like to understand what a black start looks like, because in this document that has been put together by military and others and universities, they talk about the idea that don't think that in your minds that an EMP is game over. It's a game over event. We always have to thrive on and fight on, etc. It says this in this document. But millions and millions will die once the power's been turned off. That's what we're talking about. The electric grid going down. And when that grid goes down, water will go down too. We won't have access to water if you're not pumping water out of a well in a country, property, or rural land, which is under mass assault right now through all the climate action plans. If you're in the country and you have a well, it's most important to have other methods of accessing your water and getting holding tanks so that you can access water. We need to talk about solutions and how we survive while we're continuing to understand what the assaults are. And this talks about the 5G. It spends more of its discussion about how the United States is not prepared for an EMP. It also talks about how Fukushima, the equipment that was used in Fukushima was provided by General Electric. That's all part of the cabal. And that the Fukushima Daiichi plant was under the plans that the United States offered on how to best set the entire nuclear facility up. And then, of course, when they were hit with that directed energy weapon called an earthquake, that point, I think it was a 9.0, as I remember. And then what they said took the plant out after all the safeguards that were built into it was the flood, the water. That's what took the plant out. And that was all generated. So it was a test to see how successful taking down a facility would be. And this is all part of what we face. Because when you read in this document and you find out that it was the flood, and we're being told in all of our climate action plans, our key threats in all of these plans is heat events, increased warming, literally fire and floods because of increased combustibility globally. Now, yes, that's why they're hardening up and creating redundant systems of the 5G, and not only setting up that ground-based system that we all are aware of with 250 feet between each small cell, but also now going underground with it, which many people believe is wonderful. No, it's hardening up their system. So as they burn and flood us out, they still have a system to literally take out the fragment of the remaining population and or to continue to communicate. And then, of course, the space-based weapons systems of 5G. And So I'd like to get into that a little bit more. If you'd like me to now, I will. Otherwise, let's just continue to talk amongst ourselves. But I'd like to discuss what this document tells us about 5G. It's just a couple of pages.
Can I say something?
Yes, yes.
You know, Buddha, the fat old guy, he said, there is pain. That is one of the basic things in life. There is pain. Then it's up to us how to deal with it. There's also, I thought it was really interesting, you said it's like being in a computer game. It's like that has gone totally mad. So I totally also feel that we're in this matrix. And so what is real, what is not? And also how deep the rabbit hole do you want to go? Because if we go down, which we're very down the rabbit hole now, it just gets worse and worse and worse and never ends. It just gets worse and worse and worse. At the same time, which I love that you said about prayer, that people have really felt a difference in their life. Because there is like this, what I love of life is this divine synchronicity that appears when body and mind aligns. These amazing things happen that, I mean, what are the chances that you bump into that exact person that you just needed for that exact, I don't know about your life, but it happens a lot in my life. And I think maybe the reason why it happens a lot in my life is just because I'm so grateful that whoever is doing it thinks that, well, that he's not a spoiled brat, I'll give him another one, you know, because he really knows how to appreciate it. So there's like these different layers of absolute madness going on, and then divine synchronicity and beauty. And for me, it's very important not to freak the hell out of people or anyone, because fear is what they want us to be. They want us to be fearful where they can control us. They want to get rid of us. They want us to commit suicide, all of these. They would just thank you if you killed yourself. So that's not the way to go, the way I see it. And at the same time also, there's several native nations that speak about this time as the time of the strongest of the strong, of the souls coming down at this point to excel, to be faced with incredible challenges, but to excel, you know, to excel as spirits, you know, and just, blossom into who we're supposed to be. But to do that takes massive challenges. And so this is, in my humble way of seeing it, I see this is what we're being faced with. This is boot camp on steroids, like 1,000 times nuclear boot camp. We're being beat all over the place, attacked from all different directions. The thing is, it's not over yet. As long as we're here, it's not over yet. You cannot almost drown. Either you drown or you don't. So it's like, for me, I'm still standing, and I will just keep breathing and being peaceful. Whatever they bring on, I will just focus on trying to do my best every step of the way, help people around me, help myself, and just focus on my inner balance as well as the actions out there. But actions that comes from compassion, balance, pure intention, and compassion for all, including these assholes that are doing it to us. Because the way I see it, if this is the matrix, we need them as well, you know, to build these spiritual muscles. You know, there was this old bearded guru who his name was Gurudev, and he thought, well, people want happiness, so I'm going to make a movie. And he financed the whole thing himself. It was a happy movie. It started wonderful. Everybody was so happy. And then in the middle part of the film, it was so happy. Everything was wonderful. And then it ended really happy, and everything was wonderful. And absolutely no people went to see it because they fell asleep. They got totally bored. So it's like, what is going on? What is going on? I feel that in this matrix, we're bored. We want traumas. We want excitement. We want rape. We want all of this to spice it up, give it up, you know, so spice it up again. And here we are. My God, it's full speed ahead. It's front collision time. with all of these dark forces, whatever they are. So what to deal with them? I think focus on the inner, focus on prayer, and focus on fearless exposure of this. I mean, this is not a time for wimps. This is the time to do exactly what we do, but be very aware of the inner intention. I think that is the most important thing. And also see what can we affect. Can I affect somebody, you know, beaming with laser weapons up there? I don't even know who they are or what they are, whatever. Can I affect that? Not here and that, here and now. Can I affect my way of handling, how I help people around me, or how I deal with the children or the plants or the animals in this situation? Yes, that I can do. I have the power to do that little thing around myself. And then hopefully act as an example for other people as well, that will then amplify this effect to lift the whole situation. So to see what can we do? I would say, for instance, instead of seeing, oh my God, they're so powerful, it's all over. The attacks from everywhere, we're screwed. That's it. Thank you and goodbye. Boom, goodbye, cruel world. I'll just hang myself. Not the best way to do, I think. It's a way, but not a very good one. One option would be find out, for instance, like Lockheed Martin, they did an interview on Fox News where they were bragging about these weapons, like just a week before these fires started. Why not go to Lockheed Martin and say, what the hell is up? What is going on? Interview people that are working there in the parking lots and talk to them and say, listen, guys, are you aware of what you're doing to the rest of us? Are you aware of how this affects the rest of the world, your life, your future? And go that way, make them responsible, just like you said, Catherine, you know, responsible of their action, personal responsibility on all different levels. Don't focus on the big ones up there, because they're so freaked out and hiding behind all kinds of fog, and it's like the Wizard of Oz. They look so powerful, but who's actually doing it to us? We are doing it to ourselves. People in these drones or lasers or whatever, it's people like ourselves. You know, what the hell is that? It's not.
It's human. It's human compromise, and it's also mind control. Don't you think?
I say I give the golden finger to mind control. I will put whoever is doing it responsible. You know, you have to be responsible for your actions. Then, of course, it will be much more easy to forgive you if you're under mind control, because then you're not in control of your actions. But we have to take it one step at a time. And I think it's so easy to say mind control. What does that mean? How does that affect people? Because most of us are just not in charge of our own thoughts, in charge of our own mind. And so it goes totally wild and berserk in all different kinds of areas, and also gives us the capability of really hurting people and ourselves as well around us, because we're not in charge. So, you know, it's like in Raja Yoga, they say the mind is like a drunken monkey stung by a bee on acid. You know, that's it. If you are not in control, it's capable of anything. So you have to pull in the reins, focus through meditation, take walks in nature, hug a tree, hug a cup, hug a dog, whatever calms you down. Listen to music, even in these very dangerous situations, difficult situations. I just say it ain't over till it's over. And until then, let's just focus on loving each other, compassion, being fearless, you know, really work on that fearlessness. Let go of fear. We're going to die anyway, so let's do it in beauty and stand up against these ones and just excel instead of seeing.
I agree with what you're saying, Ole, and I think it would be fair to say that as people are realizing what is occurring, there will be that time of depression and sorrow. And for me, it was the sense of treason and being, of course, lied to, and that really was an awful place to be as I was uncovering bits of the reality. So I think it's fair to say that people can expect, many people will be stunned and be sad. But there is getting beyond that. I think that's what I would really like to add to that because that was experience that many of us at Stomp the Crime had to go through. The loss of what we thought was real when we realized what was real was fake. And then
Well,
understanding.
Join the club. This
Yep.
is
And
boot
then
camp.
it
No
is.
one has said it's easy, but it's not impossible
right.
either.
That's exactly right. And so I think we just need to understand the systems, what the intentions are, what we could potentially face. We're certainly being targeted with all kinds of weather weapons. You are in your countries. We are here, of course, as well. But weapons are very similar. In fact, we heard from the Commonwealth Club here in San Francisco that's run by these nefarious policymakers that because of the increased temperature that they're creating, the increased combustibility throughout the entire world, that it won't be just areas that have been familiar with fires in the past, that the rest of the areas throughout the world will burn as well and increased floods. So that's why I keep pointing people to these climate action plans to understand, well, what does it look like where you live? What can you do to be somewhat prepared so that you feel empowered? I think this is all part of feeling empowered, to being able to take some actions so that you are not just standing there in the middle of a crosswalk with a bus coming and you're not moving. You're not getting out of the way as best you can. I don't think we can get out of the way of all of this stuff, but I think that we can empower people along this journey to get back onto the sidewalk. So it sounds like I've been disconnected.
No,
am I disconnected?
No.
Oh, okay, good.
No, I think it's very, very good points you're making. It's like, for instance, I've been aware of these things so many years. So we live up in the mountains, we live away from the sea, even though we got access to water not that far away. And, you know, we stocked food for a while. And so it's like, what can you do? At least you can start preparing or thinking in these directions as good as you can and educate yourself on how to grow stuff and not just kill plants by not watering them. You know, the more you educate yourself, and I don't want to interrupt, so please continue.
No, I agree. And I think that planting a garden wherever you're able to, have a greenhouse. When we were traveling in Russia and we were seeing the cold weather, and I think all of you are in colder weather than I am here in Northern California, but of course the weather served up as they would like it to be. So who knows about that really, but greenhouses provide an opportunity for growing some of your food. And I think little bitty things that people can do to become more self-reliant, because on top of all that we're facing, the entire global food supply is being transformed. It's becoming Monsanto on steroids, where it's being grown chemically by scientists. And this is a transition as they're knocking out all of the family farms through these climate action plans that outline properties that are not within the city growth boundaries as being unsustainable and sprawl. And so the assaults are going to amplify against people that are not already in these areas where they ultimately want to focus populations, or as many people that are, I'll just leave it at that, focused populations. And now we're seeing increased code enforcement officers being employed by our cities and counties here, particularly in the counties, because they're going to wage war with asset stripping and requirements to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and our CO2 emissions, which all the plans are about. But what I wanted to talk about was this massive accounting octopus, this inside job by this accounting hitman team that has literally gotten in to all levels of corporate agency governments and franchises. Again, keeping in mind we're a a corporate franchise system, all levels, all agencies, all departments, everything. And so we were looking at the year-end accounting that was being presented to a mosquito and vector board recently here in Northern California. And the accounting was being presented on a PowerPoint, and by somebody that they had flown to this area of that lives in Southern California to show and present this PowerPoint. And as this PowerPoint is being presented, a few of us from Stop the Crime were there because we're really following the mosquito and vector control boards closely, because we know that this is an insert in a way in which vectors will be inserted to create more disease and death in our communities, because we've been watching more expansive wetlands being created here when they pull us away from rivers and creeks, and they claim that there has to be more wetlands for the endangered species. When you go to the vector and mosquito boards, you find out that it's the wetlands that are producing the vectors and all the mosquitoes, and they're increasing those here in the United States. And when we were watching this presentation by this accounting firm, they were saying that the mosquito and vector is now going to be spending in their reserves. In other words, their revenue, their income, is no longer keeping pace with their expenses, and essentially they're running on borrowed time. And so the question that was asked this accounting firm was, we're all very much aware that they're pushing the theme of climate change when we're also aware that it is actually climate control. But in front of these boards, they talk about it as being climate change. So the question is, knowing that we're going to have, as they claim, these increased disasters of weather events all over the world, where is the build-in to these policies of within our cities and communities of cash reserves to offset the weaponized weather events they claim are happening and will intensify? They're not there. The cities are being bankrupted, city after city after city. And here's what it said on the front page of our paper here in Northern California on December 26th of 2018. And I think all of you will find enormous significance in this. It says Santa Rosa in Northern California is tapping their reserves for a fire consultant. Now here's what they're saying. So they're hiring the criminals that, of course, I'm just saying this. This is not in the newspaper. They're hiring the very criminals that are creating these acts of terrorism in our communities with weapons and fires, etc., now coming in. So here's what it says. Santa Rosa in Northern California will dig further into its budget reserves to pay additional hundreds of thousands of dollars to disaster recovery consultant it retained in October of 2017 as a result of the fires. The extension approved by the Santa Rosa City Council Board only a week ago, this is in December, this is just fresh, retains a London-based consulting firm by the name of Ernst & Young, E-R-N-S-T and Young, through May. And it's bringing the contractual monetary value of retaining this consultant to $2.3 million that's coming out of reserves. So now when you look at who is Ernst & Young, you find out it's Rothschild, Goldman Sachs, the World Bank, and all the money monsters. They have hired the economic accounting hitman team to help them get out of the disastrous economic consequences that this very team created. And so when you go to your counties right now, because they're all talking everywhere throughout the world, I'm imagining, about their 2018 budget and what their budget is rolling into in 2019. And all of our communities on every level are being intentionally bankrupted by generic proprietary accounting forms that are intentionally not citing all of the types of revenue that's required to survive. So then the hitman teams come in offering grants, further loans to all of our cities. We're seeing this time after time after time. What will then happen is these Rothschild and Rockefeller loans will then be collateralized against our city assets. Am I still here? Feels like I'm not.
Oh, I cannot hear. I cannot hear you, Deborah.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, I heard something strange. Anyway, the point is that we're being bankrupt, and what is now occurring is increased fees on all property owners now to offset this. They're even saying in the document about the electromagnetic pulse that will be intentionally done through the utilities, most likely. They could do it other ways as well, but why the grid was imposed and deployed upon us for multiple reasons, not only to kill us with frequencies and spy on us in our homes and cause the requirement of thousands of dollars to retrofit our homes for further in-depth spying and genocide, but then to also be able to pulse, which is what we've observed was used in part in these fires. Because these fires were, as you may have seen, the overhead aerial photography in the town of Paradise, the tops of the trees were green. The trees were resistant to the fire because it was not a wildfire and it was not a forest fire in the heart of Paradise. It was a house-to-house ignition. And the town of Paradise had smart meters. In fact, we went there with 2 retired fire captains that between the 2 of them have over 60 years of frontline fire team firefighting years in seeing how fires behave under normal fire behavior. And the conclusion was when we also found a smart meter that was inside a freestanding cabinet away from a school that was mostly burned. This cabinet had no signs of exterior fire on the outside, but when we opened up the cabinet, the smart meter inside had exploded, had ignited, and was melted to smithereens. We have photographs of this, and we discovered this. And then on the portion of the school that did not burn, the smart meter that was attached to the wall had melted and was dripping down the side of the building. So it's amazing that that school did not burn down entirely. It didn't. So what I'm saying here is that we have a deployment structure of a system of frequencies that's taking us out in our homes through the grid, as well as other levels of assaults as well. Because the in-home assaults can be amplified by the frequencies by increasing the pulses on individual homes as well. So we advise anybody that can to remove the smart meter and put back on an analog meter, because that is part of the assault mechanism system on us. But what we are finding and learning here in the United States is that we have never been hardened up against the consequences of a partial grid failure. And I'm reading in the climate action plans that they're saying, for example, in a climate action plan in Indiana, I found where it said if they don't reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and their CO2 emissions, they're going to have grid failure and increased vector because of increased heat. And people will be confronted with increased levels of illnesses, asthma, and fires. And when I started to see the thread of commonality of increased heat and the combustibility in the fires and the grid failure in the climate action plans, they're telling us what they're going to do. They're telling us. So I've been talking to people about looking at your climate action plan. Go online, type in, for example, you could type in Spain and climate action plan, and then you'll find a PDF that will show what Spain has bowed down to in order to avoid the change of the weather. And of course, we know that's all insanity. None of what these plans specify have any bearing on changing the weather. And they continuously talk about elimination of fossil fuel and our reliance on fossil fuel. Our fuel and our petroleum never came from dead dinosaurs or fossils or plant material. It is and has always been a renewable energy. As with water, we're being told now, as I said earlier, we're being told we have to drink our urine and fecal and pharmaceutical water because we're running out of water. And we're not. Water's a renewable. So I guess the good news is to understand the beauty of some of the reality. And the reality of primary water, the fact that it's created and it's new water, we've been taught our water comes from rain and snowmelt. Rain and snowmelt actually comes from the process of evaporation of new water that's created by the process of hydrogen and oxygen merging together under the mantle of the earth, and then you can't contain water, it must surface, or it fills a lot of the aquifers deeper and can be tapped into. And again, that's why Muammar Gaddafi, one of the reasons that Libya was so ruthlessly attacked, because they had gotten to primary water. It was at the time known as the eighth wonder of the world, the Great Man-Made River Project. So there's beauty in discovering what our reality is. And the beauty is that we have pure, clean, unadulterated water. We just have to understand that reality. And it's been proven that people have higher IQs when they're drinking primary water, because the secondary water supply, there's a YouTube up, and it's called Primary Water Explained. And I could only pray that everyone would understand the beauty of water, because Primary Water Explained is a beautiful discussion around the reality of water. We can't let reality die under all this evil. And I think that is all part of the discovery. While it's certainly satanic, and it has many genocidal programs attached to it, and that's what it is, there are also realities that are being buried that can give us hope and recreating the truth. And so I just wanted to point out the enormity of the one world accounting practices that are now wrapped in all of our corporate franchise systems, and it's wrapped in already. And that's how individual cities will be bankrupt. And to fend off bankruptcy, there will be increased fees on everything, everywhere. And that's what's going to further the economic collapse that we're all knowing and being told will happen. But I have not heard anybody disclose the very firms that are involved in this. And we discovered a firm that has wrapped and entangled itself here, and it's called, here's the letters for the firm, NBS, and that is Nellie, B as in boy, and S as in Sam. And that is the firm that is aligned with the World Bank and Rothschild. And when you follow the chain up, you see this nefarious economic plan. As I said, it's an internal inside job to literally bring our cities down to their knees and then gobble up the assets. That's what is occurring now. It's the Wildlands Project. We've talked about that ad nauseum, but it is the theft of land, the theft of water, and it is also the theft of air. by eliminating the oxygen in our air. And there's also another very, very important document. I don't know if any of you on this call have had a chance to look at it, but I would highly recommend that you do. It's called CIA 1960 Memorandum for Climate Control. That's CIA 1960 Memorandum for Climate Control. And I'll insert that under the YouTube that we format from this call so that people can easily get to these documents that you've heard me mention. Because again, I think knowing some of the beautiful aspects of discovering truth is important, don't you think? I mean, that's where I sit with all of this as well.
Well, if I may just interject briefly, I'm actually further past the point of just discovering this truth. I want to weaponize it in court. And the thoughts that I had, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring everybody together and into a, ready, steady, go sort of position to go after these criminals, but with teeth. And even if a court case is not successful, anything filed in a court case can be quoted by another. And this is how we can ratchet in terms of disclosure in a way that another court cannot dispute anymore. So my thoughts are, there are people who have been in financial regulation, whistleblowers in financial regulation, and financial analysts, and they have asked me, in terms of targeting, if I could generate a list of firms, because they are issuing guidance to investors and asset managers. And this is an industry that is extremely powerful because they have all this. This goes out to pension funds that have statutory duties and so on. And there's a whole plethora of regulations whereby you cannot invest in companies that, for example, in the UK can be shown to have invested in terrorism. So there's regulation against that. And I was asked to generate a list of firms to put on this, on this blacklist and send it out to all the financial firms as an advisory not to invest in these companies, specifically because there might be massive liabilities attached later on down the line. So long-term investors want to steer clear of any companies that have any future liabilities that could be, a black swan event. And a class action suit for damages for mass murder is one of them, which actually, funnily enough, people still have in the backs of their minds in finance because so many companies they know are involved in mass murder. So they do not want to be basically the people holding the shares last, because then they will be liable and they do not want to be associated. So one of the things that would be really helpful for me is if maybe all of you who know about stuff, so each one of us have their specific area of expertise, if we could start looking out for companies. This could be companies involved in hiring crisis actors, companies involved with anything to do with false flags, anything to do with the things that Deborah, you mentioned, Ernst & Young, this is a brilliant thing to flag, and any other of the Rothschild's companies, because we need to start compiling these lists for court. And the other thing I wanted to say is that people get extremely disconcerted, CEOs and board members, when suddenly people start filing cease and desists and are starting to file notices of liability. So there have been already a lot of resignations. A lot of key CEOs have resigned and have literally fled their posts, specifically because behind the scenes there were already, investigators asking for information. Information was being subpoenaed in court, sometimes covertly and kept secret. But companies do respond to that, and it is actually extremely easy to crush a company. Much easier than we think. And I would just suggest, my dream for 2009 would be that we start bringing all these people from different areas together.
You mean 2019?
19, yes, 2019. Sorry, that's what I meant. And so what I'm working on is literally court and trying to force these judges to be honest. But I desperately need help in getting all this documentation queued up. Because, for example, in my case, it would take me years to get to your level of expertise, Deborah. So something that you can literally, a piece of information that you can shake out of your sleeve because it's in the front of your mind, would take another person absolutely years of research to uncover, if they would ever get there. So I would be very keen in 2019 to have literally working groups, public working groups like we have them now, but where we're actually publicly discussing all the different elements that we can use in court and that we can use for commercial liens, to file cease and desist, to file notices of liabilities. And it would be my task to network with people and get the actual legal formalities, you know, in shape, so that with every new offense, we start filing these, you know?
Well, I want to tell you something that has worked at some various lower levels here in the United States, which is interesting. And sadly, I don't know why people aren't doing this, but of course, we're governed here through executive orders and statutory law, of which none of us have voted for or have agreed to. And there have been a number of instances where I know specifically when people have been confronted by their city saying that they have to engage in acquiring a license to operate a building or engage in some type of an operation, they need a license. And so I know of people that have written to the city, well, show me the statutory law that they've agreed to that requires that they have this license. So the city will send back the statutory law and say this is where it is where you have to comply. And then the person will send back, thank you very much for that information, but show me where I agreed to this, most appreciatively. And this goes around a few times, and then it's dropped, because statutory law is not any law that any of us have agreed to. And so I can say that I'm very much aware of that lower level of accomplishment. And I can say in the very beginning of my smart meter movement, when I had refusesmartmeters.com, I was working with a constitutional attorney at the time, before I realized we didn't have a constitution, that we had on our website the opportunity, and we had it all set up so that people could download these small claims court forms and file opposition to the smart meter in small claims for just the cost of a filing fee. And the idea behind that at the time was to encourage thousands of people here in California to complete those forms and file them, which would have then required the utility companies to appear in small claims for each individual small claims, and that would have been a significant monetary expense for them to go individually. Sadly, I have to say, as much as I was promoting that at the time, unaware of the court system, still, no one filed. I'm not aware of one person that took the time to fill out the forms that were provided with ways in which they fill them out. Just put your name and your address and your information here, download it, send it in with the filing fee. That was not much money. And we just couldn't get people to even do that. But again, as I say, that was the beginning of my journey in not understanding the court system. And I can see where the rollout, the deployment, was much higher than the constructs of any court system, just like 5G. I mean, the 5G is a military operation. And in the documents that I've been talking about earlier, they're saying about the 5G that the FAA and the FCC must move out of the way of any deterrent to roll out the 5G. And of course, we know that the FCC is controlled by Crown Castle out of London. They have a kill frequency division. So another to add to your list, Crown Castle. And we have in our local cities no jurisdiction to oppose the rollout of any telecommunication deployment, be it a small tower, be it a 5G, multi-small towers, be it a cell phone tower. No jurisdiction. And even at the cost of having measured a low-income housing project here in Northern California, where people have been and becoming sick, and it's been documented. The city even hired someone that was brought in to test the levels of frequency from this enormous cell phone tower that is on a hospital property right next door, adjacent to this low-income, multi-level housing project, where people over the years have been dying and are very ill. And these people have been coming in to the local city council meetings for a very long time, complaining about they've got to get rid of this cell tower, and particularly off of the hospital property. And finally, this was put on the agenda. Up until then, it would not ever even have been allowed on the agenda. And it was agendized just a month or more ago. And the city said, well, the only thing that they can do is a good neighbor request to Crown Castle. Please either increase the height of your cell tower so it doesn't blast these people right at building level, or relocate it 1,500 feet away. It was determined that maybe the frequencies would drop off enough to relocate it, or to shut off the frequencies on one side of the tower, and to just, please, would you be a good neighbor and do this?
Actually, one quick question. Did you say Crown Castle? Is that the telecommunication company?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, because, okay, there's
Crown Castle, it controls the FCC. The FCC is controlled by Crown Castle and Google.
Okay, so now one bit of information I remember from the statement of Midge Mattis. She went public on an interview, I think about a year ago, and she is the former partner or wife of the guy who owns Crown Castle. I remember that distinctly because Crown, this is cartel signaling, it's the Crown Corporation. And I pointed out that Crown Castle, calling your telecommunication company Crown Castle, pretty much implies you are a subsidiary of the Crown Corporation. Now, the guy who owns this, his name is Don something or another. I have to listen to the interview again. But he is a Satanist who has a forked tongue. He went through a ritual.
Well, of course, absolutely.
And now the thing is that is a private company. So what I would really do is really start filing for damages. This is, I think, what we have to do, and file the full economic and physical damages on these people. Because
yeah, but Catherine, the problem remains in the specific instance of these people that are just only maybe 50 feet away from this enormous cell tower, is they're dying. They're being murdered right now. And most of them are too sick. In fact, many of them submitted letters to this council meeting because they were too ill to even physically come to the meeting. And it was heartbreaking. We were in attendance and watched these people one after another go up. And I understand the idea of the filings, but we have to look at how we survive to respond.
Yeah, I agree. But one of the things I'm really looking into is because this is the entire structure is an administrative structure. And I just speak from experience. I mean, sorry, I don't want to come across as arrogant or snooty or know-it-all, not at all. But the thing is just I have gathered a lot of experience seeing this movie before play out exactly in the communist system, because the takedown operation being run on the US and Europe now is exactly from the same playbook as from the communist system. And one of the things that we found is at the time during the communist system, you would have never thought you had any power or any recourse, But one of the things that became the most valuable asset after the communist system was the paper trail. And it is only through the paper trail that people can now reassert their land rights over what was taken. And so this is why I learned very early on, it doesn't matter how corrupt the court system is, you have to get stuck, and they don't want you to go there because they know how powerful this is. This is precisely why. And there's, in law, there's a way to be basically a litigation friend. So if the people are too ill to go, it would really be the moral duty of the people who are trying to fight this to then step in as their litigation partner. So there's one concept is the Mackenzie friend in UK law, but there's many other ways where people can fight these, you know, the litigation for them. But one of the things I really see the need for is litigation templates. So we start putting together what works and doesn't work, and so that every new case can just tick it off one after the other.
Well, I hear you, but I then also look at the documents, and particularly the increased frequency assault on us all through 5G. And in the military documents of the requirement for 5G and the rapid deployment globally is for weaponized military use. And they're saying in this that not only will it bring trillions of dollars to the United States GDP, but globally as well, because whoever controls the 5G network controls all global data, including the Internet of Things. And so there's an immediate rush with stand-down orders for anyone that would get in the way of full and rapid deployment of this genocidal frequency network that is being deployed now at all cost everywhere throughout the entire world. And they talk about even in the United States becoming more efficient with manufacturing aspects of what's required in the 5G system, so that the United States is not reliant from outside sourcing of equipment. And the same thing applies with the grid system here. And the fact that they tell us in the plans they're going to power us down. That's blackout. They call, and again, they call it black start. And so I hear you. I hear what you're saying. But imagine what this plan is looking like. What they're telling us. It's what is occurring. And if and when the power is shut off, our ability to continue to survive is going to be our most basic need and necessity. So again, in empowering people, what they tell us in these documents is that they're testing certain areas' survivability with going off grid for 30 days. That means turning off all of your wireless and everything and seeing what it looks like for 30 days. Now, I say get a quick look at it through a novel of 1 second after. Because right now, when we talk in the beginning of this discussion about communication being curtailed and eliminated, well, look at the amazing opportunity that we have right now because of communication that has been provided us. And all it takes is a flip of a switch. And we're not having this cross-ocean conversation as we are right now. And that's in the game plan. And when it will happen, who can say? But it's in the game plan. It's in the climate action plans. Power off because of climate change, which is weather weapons. So I say, as Ole is saying too, we have to have a balance. We have to find love. We have to live one day at a time in right conduct, do everything we can out of compassion and love for other people, and do the next best right thing always. And whatever that is for anyone that's listening to this, that's what it is. And when people talk about solutions, solutions are only based on your level of understanding what the problem is. And as many of us have delved deeper into the problem, the solutions look a lot different. So wherever you are, whatever you do to empower yourself, do that. Because again, we're learning, and I also agree with you, Ole, that this is the time to learn, and we're here to learn, and we're here to love our fellow man, and to be as actively responsible for getting out information that we somehow or another should be very grateful that we're getting and understanding. And that's, I will tell you, it's these kinds of connections and these kinds of roundtables and this kind of dialogue that that brings me peace, because I hear other people aware. And it's what has occurred with all of the fakery is the creation of massive isolation. And that, of course, is certainly being done with the horrific torturing and targeting of people, literally the isolation. And I think that we bring hope to one another just by this conversation. What do you think about that?
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. And I want to thank you all for this conversation, and I hope that we can have another discussion soon about these topics and other topics also, and what we could do. What I would like to tell you all that the Illuminati in the years 2013, 2014 has informed us that they will shut down the whole internet for all of us on 23rd of September 2017. So we have worked quite well because we still have the internet, even if it's limited. So I hope that we will continue to work and that we will meet soon this way. Do you want to say something, Ole and Catherine and Deborah, before we finish today?
I would like to say, listen to the information, see what's going on, learn from it, take action, prepare yourself. At the same time, stay out of fear. Fear has never helped anyone. Doubt has never helped anyone. Purify your mind, go into action so that you can protect and help and support not only yourself, but people around you. Go into your community, try and make bondings with people near you so that you can help each other in a totally different way. This whole time of I, me, and mine, I think it's over and done with, thank God. Let's see it as we and us, and what can we do to lift us, and just let's surf this wave. It looks very scary, and it might feel very scary as well. Who knows what's awaiting us? I just say, bring it on. I'm here. But also, let's not go for a crash course, go straight against it. Be clever, be streetwise, and go from it from angles, whatever your passion is, whatever your abilities, whatever your goosebumps are in life. Follow those goosebumps and find out what your skills are that would be needed in these trying times. And I will do everything I can to be with you here if I can support anyone in whatever way. And with that said, over and out, and bless us all.
Well, this is Deborah with stopthecrime.net and primarywater.org. And what I would ask, because as you hear this roundtable today, we post these videos on Stop the Crime on our YouTube channel, where you can easily access this. It would be important, I believe, to circulate this kind of information far and wide. So for those of you that want to do something, at least circulate this information and start looking at some of the documents that we've discussed in this discussion today, and take heed to what has been discussed today, because there are many options for people to take. But most importantly, as we go into the year 2019, we have to strengthen our love for one another. and we have to strengthen our camaraderie and move forward with compassion and again with love and with prayer and with the opportunity that we're being given information to use it and to get it out so that other people can also discover what they face. And again, I highly recommend the use of the YouTubes while we have them and they're up, and get them out far and wide and frequent our website, stompthecrime.net, our YouTube video channel, and just get this information out, because I look forward to many conversations like this with the three of you. Again, I believe that it's very supportive for everyone that will be listening to this. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And I'll look forward to talking with you in 2019.
Yes, thank you. And Catherine?
So I would like to advocate charging, doing pretty much, I mean, you know, cleverly, as Ola said, but I also entirely recommend people to just charge at it sometimes without even fully understanding what they're doing, because this is how I got myself into the High Court and how I got a couple of things established in High Court. And the reason why that succeeded is because no one, least of all MI6, I think, expected me to do that, because it was the most foolish and just, you know, a spur on the moment kind of decision to go to the entire British intelligence establishment in the High Court, just me, myself, and I, with a little folder, knowing nothing about the law. And that already had some successes, actually more than people realize, because certain points were laid down in court. So I think what I don't want people to do is listen to all this and panic. I also would like to talk very briefly about the total blackout, because it seems very scary, but then again, please remember that this is what Russian people face sometimes every day. I grew up like that in communist Romania. We had water for about an hour per day, and we had electricity, well, sometimes when we didn't expect it, and most of the time not at all when we did expect it, and life just went on. So you just have to go back to basics, and there are many, many ways you can survive. And actually, you can probably ask any Russian family that speaks English how they coped maybe in the 1990s and 1980s, and that pretty much works anywhere, you know? And it's not actually that hard. So millions of people manage to survive like that. And it's just, don't panic. And most importantly, do not let fear stop you. You know, I much rather would recommend that everybody's really foolhardy and doesn't really think about what they're doing and just does something. You know, we all have to do something. So these are my parting words. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all. And I hope we will see each other in maybe January 2019. So thank you so much once again, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.